Alright guys, so I wanted to do a little update video, and I think later on, or soon, I will do a review of both the 6900 XT Red Devil Ultimate and the 5950X, but at this time I just want to do a little update for all of y'all that have seen and kept up with the PC that I built. The first time ever building the PC was like two or 3 months ago. And so far, it's been great. I'll go ahead and show you guys a picture of it in case you haven't seen the build video, which is on my YouTube channel if you would like to see it. And yeah, it turned out very nice. Honestly, the whole build process was not bad. Not as bad as I expected it to be. Now, it can look very intimidating for your first time. Like, I had no PC building experience at all. None. And I was like, dude, the wiring was the scariest thing. Because honestly, when you look at it, especially in this case, because it's so nice and open, it's like, oh wow, you know, you have your graphics card, your motherboard, and that's about it. You know, the power supply is hidden down yonder in its little cage. And as far as the parts, there's not a lot, which is true. But the wiring, well, even here, you can't really see. You can see some of the wires down at, excuse me, down at the bottom. But, you know, the wiring was the biggest thing for me. I was like, dude, I don't know what this is going to be like. Like, this could be an absolute headache. Like, you know, and it ended up, we had all the manuals there. It took us 5 hours total from the start of our build to the finish, give or take some time. You know, it was probably like 5 hours and like 40 minutes or something, who knows. But now I'm confident that we could build it in under an hour, and eventually, you know, after 2 or 3 builds, dude, 20 minutes, you'd be done. Like, it's that simple. But the first time, like with anything, it's going to be intimidating, and you're going to take your time, and you're going to be extra cautious. But after you complete it your first time, you're like, okay, you have that whole process mentally in the back of your head. So when you do it the next time, it's just like bing, 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 bing. But overall, the PC has been great. Have I had issues? Yes. I've had issues with, well, initially, when I was in the BIOS, I accidentally set all the cores to 4,000 megahertz on the 5950X. So they were locked in at that speed. So I was getting a drastically lower performance than I could have. And eventually I ended up figuring it out like a week later. Because I was like, man, why is it staying at that exact, you know, speed? No matter what I do, even if I'm just sitting here at the desktop, why is it staying there? So I ended up going back in the BIOS and I reset everything to default, and then that unlocked it, and it was going up to like 4.3. I don't know how high it would go. Let's say like 4.6 megahertz. And then recently I enabled PBO, Precision Boost Override, or something like that. Basically, it allows it to overclock itself, I believe, if I understand correctly. And then I just set all the limits to let the motherboard decide everything. And yeah, it gets toasty in there. Like, if I run Cinebench, when I was, you know, testing to make sure everything was stable, I was hitting like 85 degrees. So it drastically increased the heat that bad boy is pushing out. Because that thing now, after I overclocked it, will go over 5,000 megahertz. It was like, I think the highest I've seen it go is 5,025 megahertz. So it zooms, man. That, of course, that's like gaming. That's not all core like locked over that or whatever, because I'm not that experienced. This is my first time ever doing any sort of overclocking. But once I did that, I was getting a lot better performance, but I was getting a lot more heat, and I'm still debating if I want to keep it like that. Because even with this radiator, which is the biggest one I've ever had, my other computer had a 120 millimeter radiator. Even with this bad boy, with us using the CPU to encode, just encoding is putting us at 71 degrees. Now, when I'm gaming, on uncapped frame rates, I hit about 75, 74, 75. I think the highest I've seen it go is like 77 while gaming. When I'm like editing and stuff, it stays cool. And Cinebench, it'll hit 85, and I won't let it. It'll just what's it called? It won't go above 85. It'll throttle. So honestly, I could let it go hotter, but I'm like, I don't know. I might take the overclock off. It just, I haven't decided. But overall, great CPU, absolutely amazing. I'll be using this thing for as long as it'll be alive. I'll use it till it dies, just like the 7700K that I had. Excuse me. So the previous PC I had was a 7700K with a 1080 Ti with 32 gigs of RAM, but it just had Willy Wonka RAM in there. It had a Willy Wonka motherboard in there. It was a Aurora R6 Alienware computer. So that thing cooked like crazy, dude. That thing would cook. Like the graphics card, this 1080 Ti right here, this thing would just sit at 50, it was like 55 degrees at idle, just chilling in there. That's not even gaming, dude. Gaming, that thing would hit 80, 80 degrees plus until I installed MSI Afterburner. And then that just made it into this giant jet propeller system that was just insanely loud. But it kept it cool, like in the 70s. My new, the 6900 XT, you can see is idling at like 36. And this thing, even under heavy load, the highest I've seen it go is like 74, 75. And that's at upscaled 4K, uncapped frame rate, everything maxed. But overall, I'm just spouting off. I'm just spouting off on different things. I don't want to make this too long. What are we at right now? 7 minutes. Okay, we have some time. Overall, 5950X, insanely awesome, but you have to keep in mind that I'm going from a 4-core 8-thread processor trying to do content creation and game at the same time to a 5950X with a 16-core 32-thread monster of a CPU. So if you already have a good CPU like an i9 9900K or 10900K or whatever, then your experience switching from that to this CPU is going to be drastically different. It's not going to be that ginormous leap going from 4 cores to 16 cores. So you may not even feel a difference besides the FPS increase. But CPU wise, amazing. No issues there. I use it to encode everything. Every once in a while, I play around with the 6900 XT Red Devil Ultimate. I play around with that encoding. But let's be honest, the encoding's just not there with that thing. At least using OBS, it's not there. I heard that if you use the Radeon software to do it, you get better quality, but meh. I have my own feeling about the Radeon software. I don't want to go too in-depth. I think I will make separate videos to go over the CPU and the graphics card and just give a little review, so this isn't like a 40-minute long video. But for some reason, every time I launch, well, not every time, but randomly, this thing will say blah, 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 and give me this thing, and it'll reset my overclock, my graphics card. But the thing is, I thought it was maybe an unstable overclock, right? But I run benchmarks, and I play pretty graphically demanding games, as you can see. Some of these, the lower ones are at 4K, upscaled 4K, and the higher ones are just at maxed out 1080p. So you get very, very decent FPS. I'm very happy with it. But I don't have any issues. Like, I don't have crashing. It's a stable overclock, but the software just sometimes resets everything. I'll show you guys my my overclock, which is another thing. I like this software. Here's my overclock. This is for the 6900 XT Red Devil Ultimate. And this is, I've got, every graphics card from what I understand is different. So you might not be able to get these same numbers. But this has been stable for me through everything. except for the software sometimes resets itself. But the software is awesome. I wish NVIDIA had something like this. And jumping from the 1080 Ti to this card, honestly, the 1080 Ti is still an awesome card. I mean, for 1080p gaming, you still get 100 plus FPS. For 1440p, probably might still be in the hundreds at max settings, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't use my 1440p monitor really that much because it's just a Dell monitor and I get screen tearing like crazy. But jumping from that to the 6900 XT, the FPS jump is insane, especially because it's not being limited by the CPU. The 7700K just could not keep up with the 1080 Ti in most games. In some games it could, but the 1080 Ti is still an amazing card. That's why I still have it in the computer in my closet. In case anything happens to this guy, then I can throw that guy back in. But this is a beast. The 6900 XT is a beast, and I'm very happy with it. I did have some issues with the drivers when I initially installed this software with the drivers. Everything was fine. I had no issues. So I was like, oh, the black screening, it was just kind of one of those fanboy type things that people blew out of proportion, and then when a new driver came out in March 1st, I was like, oh, I'm going to update my driver and see what happens. Bang, random black screens where all three of my monitors, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, they would all flash black and then everything would be fine. It was like a flashbang, but instead of going white, everything was going black. And I was like, no, this is unacceptable. So I rolled everything back to the January drivers. Everything was fine. And I was like, man, I noticed an FPS increase, so I wanted to update. So I waited till this driver. The other one was 22.3.1. So 22.4.1 came out, and I was like, all right, now we're going to update it and we're going to figure this out. So I updated it, and I was still getting the black screens. And so what I did is I went into the settings and I just disabled all this stuff. Now, I know in the patch notes for the drivers, it says to disable this because it was causing black screens, but this was already disabled. So something else, I don't know what it was causing black screening. So I just started going through and disabling stuff. And I don't know what it ended up being, but it fixed it. So now I don't get black screens anymore. And it runs great. So overall, very happy with it. Overall, it turned out very nice. Let's find a nice picture where I can show off RGBs. My finger's kind of in the way. But overall, it turned out very, very nice. It runs very smooth. The only issue I had was with the drivers, but that was, I figured it out. It runs great. I highly recommend building your own PC. Yeah, it was intimidating. Mostly the wiring was very intimidating. But if you just take your time, like throwing everything in there, super easy. Motherboard, putting the CPU, socketing the CPU in. I was kind of scared because you have all those teeny little pins. It was super easy. It just fell right in there. You just line up the two little triangle things, and you just bloop, or the arrows or whatever, and it just pops in there. Super easy. The RAM was a little scary because on that particular motherboard, the Asus Tough Gaming B550 Plus, the one side of the clips, they don't clip open. They stay clipped, and you got to kind of jam that thing in there. On most motherboards that I've seen, both sides of the RAM clips come down. But this one, only one side came down, which is kind of weird. But besides that, RAM was easy. Everything was easy going in. The wiring took the most time. And honestly, I'm shocked that we did it right the first time. But we just went through all the manuals to see... Oh, we're at 14 minutes. Dude, I wanted this to be short. Okay. We gotta wrap this up because I don't want it to be too long. I think I will do a review of the Red Dead Ultimate 6900 XT, and I'll do a review of the 5950X. But as far as an update to the PC that we built, it's awesome. Highly recommend building your own PC. It's an amazing experience. I will never buy another pre-built PC. It is so much more satisfying knowing that you built this beautiful, shining, glorious machine. And yeah, it just gives you that level of satisfaction that a pre-built will never give you. But thank you guys very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys on the next one. Alrighty.